Hello, I'm Pete Leiden. I'm the founder of Reinvent, the media company driving these conversations on the future of work, and particularly with independent workers. And we're here with Susan Lund, who is a partner at the McKinsey Global Institute, and she is one of the lead authors of this brand new report out here on jobs lost, jobs gained, workforce transitions in a time of automation. So it's great to have you here.
Thank you, my pleasure.
So there's a lot going on in here. But why don't you just give a top line on what people would really, what does this open up for folks, and what does it really kind of, how do people start thinking about this topic through this report here?
Yeah, this report is about, this research looked at how much work can be automated over the next 10 to 15 years, but on the other side of the coin, what new jobs are going to be created. So we've added to it where the new jobs going to come from. And so we have a very granular picture of which occupations, in fact, may decline in numbers because of automation, but then which ones are growing. And what we find, the bottom line is that fears that robots are going to take all our jobs are completely overblown. It's not a question of will there be enough jobs, but there is a big question about how are we going to take people who have been displaced and retrain them to do different types of work and different occupation. And that's going to be the real challenge of our time.
And the challenge, so there's displacement folks, but what about people who maintain their jobs at some level? Do you see big transitions coming as we integrate more automation, more robotics, more AI into the workforce?
Definitely. So all of us are going to be doing slightly different things in the next 15 years, because one of the things we find is that there are very few occupations that can be entirely automated. Instead, most occupations have some tasks, some activities that we do every day that machines are going to start to do. So in that way, what humans do will shift. And often what we do is going to be augmented by machines. So work is going to change for all of us. And I think this brings what we've talked about as a mantra of lifelong learning is going to really need to be a reality for everyone, whether or not you change jobs or not.
And when you say coming, I mean, there's been speculation of when this happens, when does it start to really bite, is it happening now? How do you guys think about the time frame when you talk about this report?
Well, there's a lot of uncertainty. So we model different scenarios. And a key factor is how fast will automation be adopted. And at a slow automation adoption, the next 15 years might look not very different from today. Yes, we'll see continual change, but no rapid change. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we've got a much more rapid automation adoption scenario that could lead up to globally, say, 30% of work hours being displaced by 2030. So somewhere, it's a really wide range of what could happen. And I think that's also important to keep in mind. A lot of people are focused on the edge case of very rapid disruption, but there's a very real possibility, especially when we work with companies, diffusion of technology out into companies and through society takes a long time.
And what's the hinge? What would determine the tipping point between those two very different scenarios?
Well, it depends on really the cost and continued pace of innovation in the technology, but then what happens in companies. And ironically, one of the things we find is that rapid advances in technology may actually slow diffusion sometimes, because companies think, well, why invest today? Because a year from now, the technology is going to be better and cheaper. We all know that calculus when you're going out to buy a new computer or iPad or phone.
Mm-hmm. So really, there's a lot of uncertainty in those two scenarios. But when you say 30% of work hours, again, just to make sure we're clear on this, that doesn't mean 30% of all jobs will be gone. You're saying 30% of what everyone does in the workforce will go under some kind of evolution. Is that the correct way to think about
That's
that?
right. Now look, if you take a company perspective, if you have 100 people and 30% of what they do is now done by a machine, you may end up displacing a large number of the, up to 30 people. That may happen. That will happen in some companies. But then on the other hand, we can look at past technologies like the automated teller machine. So when that was introduced in the 1980s, at that time, bank tellers, when you wanted cash, you walked into a bank and a person handed you cash you withdrew from your account. And the ATM machine, in theory, should have just eliminated bank tellers, right? But in fact, the number of bank tellers in the United States continued to grow for several more decades, for another 15, 20 years. But what happened was bank tellers were no longer doling out cash. They were doing different things. Mm-hmm. They were helping customers sign up for credit cards, look at different savings accounts, mm-hmm. get loans. Mm-hmm. And so the job changed fundamentally, even though the people weren't displaced. So it's hard to say how companies will react. I think that what's clear is that occupations will shift. How we define an occupation, it's going to be different. But some people may in fact be displaced.
Now, you also have deep expertise in kind of independent workers, the evolution of the gig economy, platform economy. Is there any particular way that this automation and AI development will particularly impact that sector of the economy, accelerate trends in that, lead to solutions we hadn't thought about? I'm just curious on some reflections on that.
Well, another major trend in the workforce, and I think the confluence of these two is going to create really interesting new models of working. So we see the rise of what people might call freelancers or self-employed people, independent contractors. So a survey we did a year ago in Western Europe, in the EU 15, and in the United States measured how many people are earning income in this new way. And what we found is the numbers are quite large. I mean, close to 30% of working age people said in the last 12 months they had earned money somehow outside of a traditional employer-employee relationship. And about half of those were doing this as a supplemental basis. So this might be a teacher who's a tutor in the evening, could be somebody driving for Uber on the weekend. It might be a professor who also sells books or gets paid for giving speeches. And then about 15%, working age people were doing this as their primary source of income. And they report incredible levels of satisfaction. There was a perception going into this research that maybe these are people who can't find a permanent job. But what we found is 70% of them said, no, this is how I choose to be working. Now, 30%, to be fair, said, yeah, I'd really like to find a more permanent type job with benefits. So it's a mixed picture, but the vast majority of people said this is how they wanted to work. And in the future, this may grow because the flexibility that it enables is very well suited for people nearing retirement. It's well suited for people taking care of small children or perhaps their elderly parents. It works for students. And so I think that as we think about work in the future, it will be much more of a blend of working for yourself as a freelancer or working for an employer or a mix of both or maybe periods of one and then the other. So I think the whole nature of how people approach their careers is going to be more fluid and changing.
Did you make some projections in terms of how we could think about that in the next 5 or 10 years? Do you think from the 30%, do you see it growing to what kind of percentage?
Well, it's interesting. So we did the survey one point in time. We can't see growth, but different work done by the Freelancers Union and Upwork. They've done a survey now for a number of years, and their projections say in a decade's time, by 2027 in the US, the number of what they call freelancers is going to be larger than the number of people with a traditional type job and employer.
Over 50%. So, does that ring true to you? Because you said you did not make that projection.
We don't have any information about how rapidly this is growing, but given what we know about technology changing the workplace, and the fact that even people who have a traditional job, it's very different than it was a generation ago, right? No young person today thinks that they're going to go to an employer and stay for their career. And in fact, at least anecdotally, a lot of young people think it's embarrassing if you stay in one job for more than a few years and you're not, constantly going through. So we already have this expectation that if we have a traditional type of job, we're going to have a series of different employers. And so it's just one more step to say, well, instead of a series of different employers for a few years each, I'm going to now, be independent and have several different projects going at once. So it does ring true to me that this is an evolution and this is where the future's headed.
And then just bringing it back to the more recent report, is there anything in your recent immersion in automation, robotics, AI, that would make you would point out how it might specifically impact the independent worker sector differently or more impactfully? Anything, any thoughts on that?
Well, if people are displaced from technology, I mean, there's going to be a big challenge from automation, and how do you take people mid-career and retrain them? And this is something that no country has really done at scale, because you're talking about people who have done one thing in their life. They may have children, they may have a mortgage, they have financial obligations. They aren't going to be able to go back to school for 2 years or 4 years and earn a new degree the way we think about education. So there's going to need to be a big rethink in training, and how do you give people credentials or nano degrees in a matter of weeks rather than months. Now that could well mean that some of those people then choose to, in fact, become freelancers, particularly when you think about the geography of where jobs are going to be lost, where they're going to be gained. Now, we didn't look within a country like the United States down to the city level, but we know from the past that when manufacturing jobs were lost, it was often in a small town in the Midwest, for instance, and where jobs are created were in the Southwest, in the cities. So people who don't want to move or can't move, this opportunity to be a remote freelancer and get work through platforms like Upwork, or there are now many of them, Hourly Nerd, Freelance Physician, and work remotely from wherever you are could be very attractive.
Now, so you've teed up very big challenges, mega trends here that are changing the nature of work. We're also here at a gathering of the OECD and Berkeley campus here to talk about solutions, kind of policies going forward. What kind of policy recommendations are you seeing as the most? You mentioned, you seem to talk a little bit about education, but what should we be thinking about now at this kind of juncture? What's in your mind the most pressing, you could say, things that we should be kind of focused on in the near term here?
Well, I think all countries are going to have to be bold in really taking on continuous education and learning throughout your life. And there are some countries that have started to set up educational accounts so that people mid-career have a certain amount of money or can take a certain amount of time off of work to go back to get training, to become reskilled. Mm-hmm. That's something that all countries are going to have to adopt on a much larger scale. Mm-hmm. I think at the same time, what's clear is that for workers who are displaced, we're going to need to have a whole set of support mechanisms for thinking about where is there demand for new types of workers? What education or training do you need to get those? Where are those jobs? And there are countries who do that very well. So in Sweden, they have a system called job security councils, where employers pay a small fraction of their payroll into this privately run job security council. And then if they have a layoff, unemployed workers go to this job security council and they get a whole suite of support, of coaching, of information, of training to help put them in their next job. And I think that approach has been successful and is something we're going to have to adopt at scale.
Given that you're a global institute, do you think that many of the policy innovations might be coming out of Europe more than the United States, or any thoughts on the differentiation between what might be happening in Europe, what might be happening in the United States here?
Well, I think that in terms of labor markets and employment policy, Europe and the U.S. are actually quite different. So in Europe, they have a much stronger union presence. They've long had more protections for workers. And so in some ways, the U.S. can learn from them. And there's much more mixing of public policy and private policy. So for instance, the apprenticeship system that takes young people during their high school years and trains them for careers in things like manufacturing is now being slowly picked up in the U.S. But I think the U.S., I would say, at the federal level, we may not have a lot to point to, but there are cities and states and companies doing incredibly innovative things in this space. There's any number of companies who are now investing seriously in workforce skills. So Starbucks has a program to allow baristas to earn college credits. AT&T has set up partnerships with Udacity to allow its employees to earn nano degrees. And with the Georgia Tech College of Computing and Computer Science to earn master's degrees in technical fields that they think they're going to need. IBM has set up a famous charter school in New York City that combines a 4-year high school degree with a 2-year associate's degree in technical fields. So there's all sorts of interesting examples and successful programs percolating up in the United States. The challenge for the US is going to be then to be able to scale those on a much larger scale.
So you kind of bled into this a little bit, but I'm just wondering, is there any particular responsibility or role that the tech companies, the platform companies themselves, those developing AI and others, have at this moment? I mean, is there anything that you see as a particular responsibility there?
Well, I think all companies are going to have to think about investing more in training. When you look at the aggregate national data, what you see is that corporate spending on training their workforce has been declining for several decades, and that trend is going to need to be reversed. And the training that does occur often is targeted on the highest skilled workers anyway. So I think there will need to be a shift in all companies thinking about building the talent they need and developing their own talent in-house as opposed to just trying to hire from the outside, particularly for occupations where there are a lot of shortages of skills. And we're starting to see that shift. But I think all companies are going to have to, going forward, think much harder about building and creating the talent pools they need as opposed to expecting to be able to hire people with exactly the set of skills and experiences they need.
Now, this report definitely has this a sense of the big picture, the global perspective for sure. But when you kind of step back from all the work you've been working on here, you know, how critical a moment are we in the kind of evolution of the global economy here, the evolution of our technology? I mean, what kind of import would you put in the juncture we're in here a little bit, or how do you think about it in those kind of terms?
Look, in some ways, I think we are at a critical juncture. We've seen in the United States for the last 15 years what's happened to a large segment of the manufacturing workforce that was hit by a combination of globalization and technology. That meant that manufacturing productivity has gone through the roof, but we have fewer people working in manufacturing. And the response was, you know, not very large, not very concerted, and so a lot of those people have never gotten back into a career track like they had. So I think we're at a juncture where, with the coming advances in automation, technology, they're going to help humanity in many different ways. We may see higher productivity growth, wealth creation. We may be able to solve problems, get more accurate medical diagnoses, solve issues like climate change. I mean, the new world of technology has a lot to offer us, but I think that left unmanaged and without thinking about workforce transitions, we could end up with growing inequality, high-skilled people who are employed and large swaths of other people working at very low-wage jobs if they're working at all. So I think we're at a point where we need to choose what kind of outcome do we want. And if we make the right choices, we can have a vibrant society with everyone participating. But if we don't make those choices, I'm not sure that that's what the market would deliver on its own.
And how confident, as a kind of a last question, how confident are you that we'll make it through this transition? Are you optimistic or concerned?
I would say I'm a worried optimist. I'm an optimist by heart, and I think that the U.S. in particular, but all countries, are remarkably adaptable, right? If you look at U.S. history, we've been here before. In the shift from an agricultural society to a manufacturing society 100 years ago, came the rise of the US high school movement, where only 10% of people completed high school in 1910, and 40 years later that was 80%. So it was a massive shift towards sending everyone through secondary education. And then after World War II with the GI Bill, well, lots of people started finishing college. So we've done it before. So as an optimist, I'd like to think that we're going to rise to the challenge again today. But I am concerned.
That's a good place to stop. Thanks for your stopping by and really giving us, laying out these ideas, and appreciate this.
Okay, great. Thank you.